Chocolate. Who here doesn't love chocolate? Even just the thought of chocolate is making most of you smile. Isn't it the best? Now think of change. Think of the challenges we all face every day. A constantly changing work environment and rapidly shifting priorities. Can this frenzied activity associated with change really be better than chocolate? As president of the Lean Consulting Group, Michael Bayer leads a highly trained group of consultants known as the Implementation People. His 16-year background as a senior telecommunications manager in government, coupled with 18 years in the forefront of leading change initiatives at hospitals, at healthcare organizations in the United States and Canada, have solidified his reputation as a change expert. Because of his wife, he is also an expert on chocolate. He will help us understand why change is better than chocolate and how to enjoy both. Please help me welcome Michael to teach us the 4 reasons change is better than chocolate.
Chocolate. Is there anybody in the room who doesn't love chocolate? That wonderful sweet treat that lies on your tongue and just makes you feel so good. And how could change possibly be better than that? Well, first of all, have you ever wondered where chocolate comes from? Archaeologists have discovered that in Mesoamerica, that part of southern North America, Central America, and northern South America is where chocolate was first discovered. And they found records in 1900 BC of the use of chocolate. But in those days, they didn't enjoy chocolate the way we do. They enjoyed chocolate as what we call now an adult beverage. The Aztecs thought that chocolate seeds were a gift of Quetzalcoatl, their god of wisdom. And they thought that this gave them wisdom, made them smarter. How many of us would love to give chocolate to our bosses? Yes, the hands go up. Joseph Fry in 1847 found a way to make moldable chocolate, and he actually invented the chocolate bar. Cadbury figured out a way that they could make chocolate and put it in boxes, and they actually made boxed chocolate. And Daniel Peters, in about 1875, added milk to chocolate and created milk chocolate. And then, of course, about 1896, Hershey, who I think is the granddaddy of them all, invented or discovered or developed the Hershey Kiss. Now think about chocolate for just a minute. It hasn't fundamentally changed in over 4,000 years. There was one development. They added milk. So how could something that hasn't changed in 4,000 years be better than change? And change is actually better than chocolate. How many of you here like change? There are actually a few hands went up. I am actually surprised. Most of my audience says change. No, I don't like change. I can't take change. But every one of us actually loves change and enjoys change. And I think to prove this to you, I want to take you on a trip down memory lane. I was moving things around in the basement, and I found this. A video camera. When I bought it, this was the most compact video camera on the market. The guy said, imagine, you don't even have to put this one on your shoulder. There was all kinds of innovations. Who remembers the flip phone? Inspired by Star Trek or Star Wars, and if you don't know the difference, it really doesn't matter. But that's where the flip phone comes from. Remember the calculator? This one is really nifty. You put the calculator down, you flip a little switch, a little thing, gate goes up, and it raises the calculator up. It's just so cool. Remember when we listened to music on devices that looked like this? Remember, this is an early day timer, an organizer. So this is your calendar, which actually had a paper calendar in it. And I remember my mother was so proud of this device. Many young people in the crowd, you might not recognize it. This is a camera. It even has a bellows. This was super ultra high tech at one time, and it didn't need a memory card. The memory card it used was something like this, called film. This is the same film that the Apollo astronauts took to the moon and brought back to be developed by Kodak, and now Kodak doesn't develop their film anymore because this as a memory card is obsolete, and in fact this actually expired December of 2000. And you would put that in a more modern camera like this, which actually still has some pictures, so please smile. It doesn't matter because nobody can develop the film. So what's my point? My point is this: we have all of these devices that at one time we brought into our lives. Why? Because it made our lives easier. We had memories, we had music, we had entertainment, we were organized. And what happened to all of this stuff? All of this stuff has now been replaced by something that looks like this. An iPhone, or a phone very much like it. And every one of us has a phone like this in our pockets or in our purses. And this one small device has replaced all of this stuff. Better, faster, and quicker. So for those of us that are resistant to change, you're not really resistant to change. What you're resistant to is you're resistant to being changed. You're resistant to accept new ideas, new concepts, new technology until you see the benefits of that technology for you. So we are not resistant to change, we are resistant to being changed. And that's one of the first great points about change. Change initiates and encourages innovation. Imagine Steve Jobs. He had a dream. He wanted to make an electronic computer-like device that had one button. And your iPhone and your iPads and your Androids, whatever you have, has one button on the device. Star Wars is coming for real. Because if you got one of these or one like it, you'll have Siri or someone like her, or it, I still can't quite figure that one out, where it's voice activated and will do things, you just have to speak to it. So we're not resistant to change, we're resistant to being changed, but change creates innovation. Because without that challenge, this would have never been invented. So how does chocolate help you do that? What chocolate does is chocolate helps the brain, and it creates chemicals and compounds that help prevent brain loss, and it stimulates those kinds of actions and makes us drive forward innovation and change. So chocolate also, or change rather, also helps us accept new challenges and helps us accept some of the stresses in our lives that can drag us down, but if we really accept change, it can drive us forward. We can get that positive stress, that positive action that can take us to places where we never knew we would go. Many years ago, I worked for Transport Canada, and I had a young lady working for me. Let's call her Kathy, because that was her name. Kathy was a wonderful girl. She was our clerk. And I remember I was a supervisor. I had a telecommunications officer working for me. Kathy was their unit clerk. She processed our bills, kept us all going, kept us all organized. But she always said to me, she said, Michael, that job is mine. I'm going to have that job one day. And part of her job description was the fact that she would take over that job when that person went on holidays, but she would never do it. Because we were busy, we would always have to bring somebody in, put them through these big training programs very quickly, put them in there so we get them going to help us in holiday times and when people were away, but we could never get Kathy to do that because she was resistant to being changed. She had fears about her abilities. So I went to my boss one day and I said, we need to do something here because this is driving me crazy. This is taking a long time for me to constantly train people to get people in. I want to put Kathy in that job because the girl who was working in that position had asked me for a 4-month transfer to another department to work on a big project. And in terms of her career development, it was the right thing to do. So I said, yes, you can go for 4 months. I had a huge hole to fill. And I said to my boss, we need to put Kathy in there because there's a lot of clerks in the government that can handle our billings, keep us organized. That's fairly standard work, but this is specialty work, and I don't want to constantly train. He said, be very careful. So I sat down with her, and I said, this is what we want to do. She said, I can't do it. I said, yes, you can. I said, you absolutely can. She said, but I don't know what to do. I said, I know that. I said, so we're going to have telecom school. So every Tuesday and every Thursday, we booked a boardroom from 2 to 4 o'clock. The two of us would go in the boardroom, and I trained her in her job. When the gal left for her 4-month assignment, we put Kathy in that job, and guess what? You know, she was a little, as we all are in a new job, we're a little unsure of ourselves, but again, it's how we manage people, how we train people, how we develop people, how we encourage people, because part of the challenge of change is, can we make our staff see the vision that we have for the future in terms that they can understand? So we managed to do that. She got in the job. She got really, really into this. And after 4 months, she became a superstar. And we were a great team because Kathy was a detail person. For those of you that know me, I'm not that good on details. I can see big picture. So we would walk around me saying, oh, we got to do this, this, and this. And she'd say, my God, how are we going to do all this stuff? Are you really aware of the stuff that we have to go on here? But she did a great job. And what happened was that the gal who left to do this assignment came back for a couple of months and then took a position at another department and left. And now I had a vacancy. And I said to Kathy, you need to apply for that job. She said, okay. I said, but here's a problem. You need a driver's license. She said, why do I need a driver's license? I said, because you have to go out on airports, on airfields. We have to get you an airport driver's license, and they won't issue you one unless you have a real driver's license. I said, and strangely, for some really weird reason, airports don't like taxi cabs on runways. She was 35 years old, a single mom, had never had a driver's license in her life, did everything in her life on public transit. She says, I don't know if I can do that. I said, if you don't, we're going to screen you out because it's a job requirement. So, what she did, she started to consume a lot of chocolate because, believe it or not, chocolate helps lower blood pressure, helps alleviate stress. Kathy was the kind of a gal, too, it was hilarious. You know, there would be stressful files. We all have that stressful things at work. Everywhere there was a stress point, you'd open the file and you'd find a little jar of chocolate. And the rule was that if you opened it and had to work that file and you needed it, you took what you needed, you ate it, and you just worked on the file. She ate a lot of chocolate. I remember I was out of town. It was a Friday, and I couldn't get back. We had a technical issue in Thunder Bay. I figured I better phone the office, so I phoned the office, and she answered the phone, and she was so excited. She said, I've been wanting to talk to you all day. And I said, what's the deal? She said, I passed my driver's license this morning. The last impediment to take the job, to qualify for the job. So when we accept change and when we encourage people to accept change, when we try to help them understand the positive aspect of change and what it means to them in terms that they can understand, that resistance to change goes away. When we posted the job, 92 people applied. She was the only one on paper that qualified. So you know what? We made everybody take a written test. The first question on the test is, what is telecommunications? Because it was a telecommunications officer's job. Strangely, no one knew the answer. But she knew all the other answers. And we promoted her. And she was very, very successful. And in my career as a manager, that to me was it's not my success story, but it's the small part I had in her, helping her manage change and get through the issues around change and to understand what it could mean to her is the greatest accomplishment I ever had as a manager. There's a huge misconception, by the way, in change, and here's the third point on change. There's a huge misconception that change is bad, that change causes bad stress, and all the rest of that. And that is not true. That is a misconception. Because change, and when we accept change, when we can see the big picture, we can turn that negative stress into positive stress and energy and move towards that future that we see, that future point, the great part about change. Happened to me too. September the 28th, 1996. I was invited to join 126 of my colleagues in the Skyview Ballroom of the Marlborough Hotel for a company coffee. What a great day we thought this was going to be. So myself and 126 of my best friends sat there. We were drinking coffee. The executive director got up with tears in his eyes and said, I don't know how to tell you this. He says, so I'm just going to tell you. They're shutting us down and they're laying you all off. They're going to save 12 jobs. Wasn't the best Tuesday morning of my life, I got to tell you. Gladly took the taxi chit home. Said, what am I going to do? I was in my mid-40s. Who's going to hire me? Where am I going to go? How am I going to make the mortgage payments? And what am I going to do? And when I got over that grief cycle, and we go into a grief cycle and we experience a big loss like that, I realized that this was an opportunity to do whatever I wanted to do. I got a job in telecommunications. I worked that for a little while. And then I woke up one morning and I turned to my wife and I said, sweetheart, I want to quit my job and become a speaker. And strangely, she said, okay. And that it wouldn't have been that day, that morning, in the Skyview Ballroom of the Marlborough Hotel, I wouldn't be here today. I would have never experienced things that I experienced over the last 20 years that have changed my life. I've been to places I never thought I'd be. I've met people I never thought I'd meet. And I've had this wonderful, rich experience of life, all because of change. So change really is the thing that we have to embrace. We have to be able to see the big picture. So how can chocolate help us? Well, again, chocolate can help us reduce stress. It helps, there's chemicals and compounds in chocolate that will bring our blood pressure down, keep us a little calm, kind of put us in a different headspace. So chocolate can help us maybe take on the challenge of change. But the challenge is to take on the challenge of change, because change is better than chocolate. There's no two ways about it. The other point on change, well, maybe perhaps before we go on to there, let me ask you this. Has any of you read the Winnipeg Free Press editorial page? Oh, there's 3 of you. Boy, Free Press wouldn't be very happy. That's not a lot of subscribers. Yes, anyway, I was reading it the other day, and I thought, wow, what an article. I need to share this on Sunday when I'm speaking. And here's what I read in the Winnipeg Free Press. It said, the world is too big for us. Too much is going on, too many crimes, too much violence and excitement. Try as you will, you get behind in the race despite of yourself. It's an incessant strain to keep pace, and you still lose ground. Science empties its discoveries on you so fast that you stagger beneath them in hopeless bewilderment. The political world is new, seen so rapidly, you're out of breath trying to keep pace with who's in and who's out. Oh, isn't that the truth? Everything is high pressure. Human nature can't endure much more. How does that describe most of our lives? Is that how you feel some mornings when you get up and you go to work? I've got to tell you a secret. That article did not appear in Friday's Winnipeg Free Press. That article was actually written in the Atlantic Journal on June the 16th, 1833. So what's changed? Absolutely nothing. The one thing that we know in life, and the one thing that we're sure of in life, is that change is constant, and it's there. Benjamin Franklin said the only 2 sure things in life is death and taxes. I have a lot of respect for Benjamin Franklin, but he left something out. The only sure thing in life is death, taxes, and constant change. And our world is changing. Our vocabulary is changing. Let's go back just for a minute or two back to 1996. You know, in 1996, for most of us who were around, because many of you weren't, but in 1996, a computer was something that you saw on a science fiction TV program or in the movies. You remember, anybody here remember the computer monitors of those days? One of us shaking your head, Kurt's just saying, I don't really know what he's talking about. Black screen, red writing, monochrome. You had any kind of a headache, man, you couldn't work. I remember Windows 95 came out. We had to load them on our machines. It came on 45 3.5-inch discs. 45 3.5-inch discs. There were no computer viruses in 1996. Believe it or not, in 1996, some people had the capacity to text. BlackBerry actually invented texting, if you're wondering. And again, innovation, right? Change. But BlackBerry had a pager, and they said, why would you have to phone in to tell somebody to type it? Why can't we make a pager where you type the message and send it direct? So those typing pagers evolved in what we today call texting. But in 1996, the average number of texts per month that people sent or received who could text was 0.04. That means you received one text every 2.5 years. Many of you get more than one text every 2.5 minutes. Never mind 2.5 years. We had a vocabulary back in 1996. Some of us don't even remember what that vocabulary is. But again, let's think about in 1996. In 1996, an application was something you filled out to get a job. A window was something you hated to clean in the spring. A cursor was someone who used profanity in public. If you unzipped in public, you probably got arrested. A log-on meant you had to put some more wood on the fire, right? A hard drive was you 14 hours in the car because you were too cheap to get the motel. And a virus was the flu. So what's the point here? The point is the fourth point about change. Change makes us think differently. It makes us look at different ways, different meetings, different ways to do our jobs, different ways to do our work. And it also helps us with both accountability and empowerment. And when we accept being changed, when we work in organizations that are open to that and to helping us, it makes all the difference in the world. And the kind of innovation and the things that we can discover are absolutely amazing and astounding. I work in healthcare, mostly in the U.S. I was working in a small hospital in rural Illinois. Now, first I want to set the scene. This was a very small hospital, 24 beds total. This was not the Health Sciences Center. This was not something the size of St. Boniface. 24 beds. When you have an organization where people are open to being changed because they can see the advantages to themselves and to the organization, miracles can happen. What they do in that hospital are called Gemba walks. Now, for those of you that don't know what a Gemba walk is, the Gemba walk is basically you follow someone around and watch them work. And then you ask questions about why they do things in certain ways. You make observations, and perhaps you can find a better way or make suggestions to find a better way and more effective ways to do their jobs. So they were doing a Gemba walk with a phlebotomist. For those of you that don't know what a phlebotomist are, they're the ones that suck your blood when you go in, right? Stick the needle, they take the drop. They're working with the phlebotomist, and they saw the phlebotomist using this little butterfly-shaped bandage, about the size of your thumb. So after the draw, they would put the butterfly bandage on, obviously to cover the puncture and to help the wound heal. So someone asked them, so do you have to use that bandage? Like, why do you use that bandage? And this is because in our training, that's what they show us and ask us to do. They ask us to use this bandage and everything else. They said, okay, that's cool. Do you have to use that particular bandage was the next question. And the phlebotomist answered, well, not really. We use it because that's what we were trained to use, but we could use a different bandage. They said, however, there may be times when that specific bandage is the one to use. They said, okay, that's fine, but could you maybe try using another bandage? Let's just see how it goes. They said, sure. So they did. They switched to a different bandage. And at the end of the year, they saved $12,000 on bandages that were as big as your fingernail. $12,000. So imagine an organization that's open to being changed, where people are open to being changed and not threatened by that change, the difference that can be made for them and for the organization as a whole. So what about chocolate? Well, chocolate has compounds, again, that help stimulate the mind, that help stimulate thought. So maybe the idea is, if you really want to innovate, if you want new ways of thinking, maybe what you need to do is consume some chocolate to help you along that process. So how can we accept change ourselves? How can we overcome the reluctance to being changed that we all have? The answer is simple: get involved. If there's a change looming on the horizon, don't run from the change, and don't necessarily run for the chocolate drawer either. But sit down and try to determine for yourself, what's the big picture? How can I get involved in this change? You see, we're reluctant to being changed, not necessarily to change. Let me give you another example. How many men in the room would gladly give up the remote control for their television? No hands have gone up. Now, for those of you that don't know what I'm talking about, because there's some young people in the audience, let me explain how it used to be. We used to have these large cabinets called televisions, the same name, and they had a dial that went from 2 to 13 and a U. The U never worked in Canada. We figured it stood for USA, and the Americans were hiding something from us. But anyway, if you wanted to change the channel, you would have to get your butt out of the chair. You would have to walk over to the TV and turn a dial. You'd get on a channel, and hopefully this picture was stable. Otherwise, it was all kinds of other controls that you would play with to improve the picture. Of course, none of us knew what we were doing, and we would invariably ruin the picture more. But that's how we used to change the channels on our television sets. Today, we have flat screen TVs, 3Ds, curved screens, control in our hand that gives us access to hundreds of television channels and all kinds of streaming stuff, and we never have to get out of our chair. So why did we accept this? Because we could see the advantages of not having to move off the couch. And it's the same thing with change in our lives. We have to sit down and for ourselves discover where the benefit is for us and to see that big picture. If we're managers or supervisors, as I had said before, it is a key part in our role. We see the big picture. We understand the benefits. We understand the change. But does our staff? And the key thing that we have to do as managers is to translate our vision to them in terms that they can understand, so when they understand the change, they'll accept being changed. And when we have organizations to do that, we have the same thing that happened at Harrisburg, where people are going, they're watching people work, no one feels threatened. And when no one feels threatened, then change can happen easily. Another story, and this is an incredible story, and another client that I worked with, again, a healthcare organization, to give you an example of what happens in empowered and engaged organizations that accept being changed. In American hospitals, there's people called coders, and what the coders do is coders get the charts and the lists and all the procedures that are done, and they code bills for billing to the insurance companies. And a coder, who sometimes doesn't even work at the hospital because they can work out of their home, phoned the person in the hospital responsible for this and said, "We think there's an error in the start-stop times of your IVs. It's not making sense to us." And they said, "Okay, well, we'll look into that for you." Now think about this. You've got RNs on the floor, and they're controlling those pumps. And someone's going to come to them and say, "You're not doing your job right." But an empowered organization that's open to being changed, that realizes the power that comes from examining themselves from all angles, they said, "Okay, let's do a study." So they did a study. They are now billing, are you ready? $80,000 a month in profit. Because the drugs were paid for, the time was paid for, the equipment was paid for, all the expenses were paid for, but there was errors in the start times and on the stop times. And someone had the courage to say, I think there's an issue with our process, because it's never about people. It's about process that is broken down that we need to fix. But that's the power of engaged organizations that accept change. So that's the challenge that we have, ladies and gentlemen. How can we accept change? Can we change our mindsets to be willing to be changed? Because we don't have resistant to change, it's resistant to being changed. That's up to us. Now, in that instance, there is something that can be very helpful to us. It's called chocolate. The chemicals in chocolate help us. It lowers our blood pressure. It relaxes us. It helps us get rid of stress. And it opens up our minds to being changed. But change still is better than chocolate, because really, milk chocolate in the 1800s was the first innovation in chocolate in 4,000 years. Guess what the second innovation was? They added an almond to the Hershey Kiss. So something that's hardly changed can help us change. But you can eat all the chocolate you want, that's not going to help you. But it's to change your mindset, to move forward, to do the things that you need to do to help yourself and your people move ahead. That's what makes the difference. And in closing, this is all I have to say. And I was taught this by my wife and daughters. And it's very important to remember this as we leave. Chocolate comes from beans. Beans contain protein. Therefore, chocolate is protein. The Canada Food Guide says that as adult Canadians, to maintain proper health, we need 50 grams of protein every day. The question I have to ask you is, are you getting yours? Thank you very much.